Welcome to AskBYS Podcast, a monthly podcast brought to you by Bainbridge Youth Services and its supporting sponsors. AskBYS Podcast connects parents to professionals that can provide support, education, and resources on a particular topic in parenting. The speaker's words and opinions are their own and do not represent the policies or opinions of BYS. My name is Shannon Ameling, and I am your host. I am here with Milagro Castilleja as our producer. We're recording live at the Media Arts Studio at BARN, the Bainbridge Artisan Resource Network. Today's episode is sponsored by Quick Lock and Windermere Realty of Bainbridge Island. We are happy to welcome our parent guest, Laura Dietz, a Bainbridge Island resident and mother of three.
Hi there.
Hello. And our professional guest, Maria Metzler, mother of three and executive director of Helpline House, the Bainbridge Island Food Bank and Social Services Organization.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Welcome. Today's episode is Philanthropy and Parenting. What does it mean for kids now, and how do we teach that? So we'll turn the conversation to Laura.
Thanks so much. Maria, I wanted to start off broadly. What does philanthropy mean to you?
That's a big question, and I love that question because I think about it often, as you can imagine, and I think about it also in particular to the context of the larger conversation, which is parenting and youth, and so philanthropy to me can be simple and can be complex, and both are true. And so in one sense, philanthropy is giving. It's the spirit of giving. And it can, when needed, it can be that simple. And kind of in the larger context for me, philanthropy, I liken it to community. I really believe foundationally in the power of and the value of community. And what that means to me is that we all have a place in community. There are times when we are giving, there are times when we are receiving, there are times when we need things, and we all have roles to play, and those are not static, and they shift and they're dynamic, and we go through several of them each day. And in that sense, you know, we need information, we need to get things done, we need generosity of time from someone, we need tangible things from people, and everyone in community plays that part in various ways. So you are always in community to me, you are always a giver, you are always a receiver, and it's the line is blurred intentionally. And so when I kind of think about philanthropy and the spirit of giving, I think about it in this lens of community in which we are always, sometimes people think of it as simple, and this is not a bad thing, but as simple as giving money. And that's kind of one of the most accepted definitions of philanthropy, but I like to broaden it more because it's not just that. That's wonderful. That's terrific. And we need that. And we need other things. And so it really is, to me, a spirit of giving that plays out in this community we are all a part of. And how much we embrace the spirit of philanthropy, the spirit of giving, somewhat equates to how much we are actively participating in this community. So we don't all have to be really embrace that spirit all of the time. And on those times, sometimes we're not all actively participating in this community, and that is how it goes, and that's what makes it community. So that is a little bit of a different shift, I think. I'm interested in your thoughts on that. What do you think about that?
Absolutely. I love that, and I love the broadening of it for that idea of, and it I think also shifts the conversation to you are a giver or you are a receiver, because you're right. I think it is both, and it is there might be a time when you may need more, and it may not be just money or a financial gift. It might be someone's time. And I just love that idea. And when I was thinking about it, it was similarly, because it can be as simple as kindness, right? And so if we think about it from whether it's your time, your treasure, your talent, whatever it is that you're giving, if you're giving someone kindness, there are times when you know, I may need that more than you need that today, all the way up until a financial gift, and I may need to enter a food bank or things like that. So I love that idea, and I think just broadening it helps us all realize how important philanthropy is sort of to the foundation of our community.
I also think us all broadening it, the definition of philanthropy, the spirit of giving, means that there is someone who is doing the giving and there's someone who's receiving the giving. And when we think of it as simplistic as finances, which again is terrific, but when we really kind of take that narrow slice, then it takes away the community piece. It really kind of divides givers and receivers. When we think of it as a spirit of generosity, a spirit of kindness, a spirit of giving, and if we really think in all of our days, I am a giver and a receiver constantly. Mm-hmm. And so if it takes away that kind of stark polar opposite of the giver and the receiver, and it's blurred to any minute of any day, I am one or the other or both. And so then it just incorporates it more into our life and isn't a thing that I practice sometimes that is kind of over there and is great to do, and it's wonderful when I do it. But it just is a way to kind of reframe it in our minds that we can kind of just always be doing it in various ways.
I love that. And I think one thing that popped in my brain is if it's something that we're doing sometimes, then it's almost more task-based, right? Like maybe I volunteer X hours or I give X dollars. But if it really is a fabric of our day, then it is something we're doing all the time.
Yeah.
I love that. And I think that's sort of a good segue into how do you talk to about philanthropy to kids, whether they're 5 or 15. And I think that not only just talk about it, but also how are we role modeling it?
Yeah. I think in the way of kind of framing it as community, I think that's the way I hope my kids understand philanthropy. And I don't know that I've necessarily done the best job in instilling that in them, but I hope that they, what I want from a very early age from them is to get away from this dichotomy of that there are groups of people who do the thing and receive the thing. And I really want to get away from that because we all do the thing and we all receive the thing. And so if we can help kids recognize at various points at all points throughout their day that they are givers and that they are receivers, I want them to grow up not thinking that they need to be one or the other. And that is what makes all of their communities, I mean, right now their communities are their schools and their sports teams and their scout troops. And like, that's what makes it all work, are every one of those people who is practicing a spirit of philanthropy is makes it all work. And so what I hope for kids is to understand that when they have questions or they're asking of their friends or they're asking of their teacher, that's a moment in which they are practicing receiving. And when they give kindness and when they give a hug and when they give things like that, they're practicing the other side, the giving. And it can be even in the same interaction. And I hope that they can understand that on a really basic level so that when they are in a position to do the bigger things, to do the financial gifts, to do the more tangible things, I hope for them that that's more of a natural step for them. And it's not so much of a decision, can I or should I do this, but this is just what we do.
I love that. I love that. If we think about maybe more of the tangible sides of that for the younger ages and then also the older ages, I'd love to just brainstorm how they could talk to their 5-year-old about giving their time or, their allowance or whatever that is, all the way up to, teenagers, how we can talk to them about doing the same.
I would love your thoughts on that, because I'll tell you, my kids have, the give, save, spend jars for their allowance and for what they earn. And I don't think, I don't drive hard on that. I'm not checking. I don't think they put as much in the give as they do in the spend jars. But introducing that concept, I think, with money, because that's like, for them, that's a big deal for the youngers, But the 5-year-olds, I'm trying to think of my 5-year-old who is at a very, like, what's mine is mine phase, and you can't touch it and you can't have it. I think taking away instead of the tangible gifts of being a giver, the time that you spend, who you sit next to at lunch, and, listening to them and sharing and things. So just really what's, I think just being, and this is hard because we're all so busy, but being just really intentional in your conversations with your kids to listen for moments in their days that they are already doing these things. So instead of saying, have you thought of sitting with someone who looks lonely? And they're like, Mom, stop, But in ways, our kids are amazing and they're already doing these things. And so listening intentionally for ways that they are doing these things and kind of highlighting them. Older kids, I think, is a bit easier to be more specific and to point out more particular ways, and to get more into the actual chunks, if you will, of time, talent, and treasure. Like we can talk to them at that level about those things. Giving someone's time when you're a kid is hard because you want to be doing what you want to be doing. And at the same time, when kids volunteer, in my experience and what I've seen both at work and just with my own kids doing various projects, they have so much, they're so proud of themselves. And so again, kind of thinking of volunteering as philanthropy and not just the gift of finances or the gift of something, but trying to incorporate that into younger and when they're age appropriate, older. What do you think?
I love that. And I would agree. It's how do we celebrate the moments when they're doing that already in terms of the kindness and generosity of spirit just in their day-to-day. And I do think it is, especially as they get older, it is being intentional about how are we finding ways to potentially volunteer with organizations or join junior boards or things like that. And then I think a lot of this is role modeling as parents. How do we, we are, as you said, we're all, everyone's so busy, but how do we find times, it may not be as committed as being on a board member, but, whether it's going into the school, once a year or whatever that commitment looks like, all the way to finding opportunities in our neighborhood or picking up trash. It's just being intentional about giving our time. And I think if we're role modeling that, then that makes that conversation so much easier. And then same, when I was thinking about the teenagers, neither of us have teenagers quite yet. So, but when I was thinking about the teenagers, it really is, we also have the spend, save, give. And it's a little bit easier now because we can sort of help guide that probably. But as teenagers, giving them more agency, you know, to say, what are your interests? Yeah. Their interests may be very different than my interests, but allowing them the agency to do the research, to find organizations, and then to give from that give jar. And so that's how I was thinking about it. But so much of that, I think, comes down to role modeling. Yeah. And what are we doing as parents? And sometimes I will say, I think that we have to, like we've been saying, be really intentional about it in the sense that sometimes kids are, in the best way, totally oblivious. And so you can be taking them along to do X, Y, or Z, and they have no clue that they're doing philanthropy with you. And so sometimes you have to be specific and talk about it and celebrate it, like you said. And I think even it sounds a little bit self-serving, a little bit pat on the back, but even the little things you do as a parent, I think you should
should call them out and just have, not to be celebratory, but again, to have, I can use my own kids as an example about how oblivious they are sometimes. Sorry, kids. To say like, they don't notice X, Y, or Z. I'm like walking right past them and they don't notice that I'm doing the thing. And then they ask for it. And I'm like, really? And so if I am, have just incorporated a practice in my day-to-day that they don't know about, then it doesn't necessarily help me instill in them what my husband and I are doing as parental figures for them. And so sometimes being like calling it out and sometimes being really specific about it, I think is something that we'll have to do.
I agree, which probably almost goes, the opposite of what we think about philanthropy.
Right, exactly. Right. I think that's the point I'm trying to make.
Yes,
thank you.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think that, I think what comes to mind is, we would never want to point out the things that we're doing. But I hadn't thought of that. And I think it's so true of what are we doing each day? If it's returning the cart, if just the little things, if we see someone that needs assistance, from the small to this is how I choose to volunteer my time on a monthly basis. I agree. And I think it's so important to acknowledge that, because it goes against everything we probably believe about philanthropy, which is we do this out of generosity of spirit.
Right.
But for our children, yes, I completely agree.
Yeah. And I think what you were saying before, I dovetailed on what I was thinking in terms of like asking them their interests in things and helping them find. Our kids are also very busy. Kids on this island are very, very committed and very busy. And so helping them find ways within the things they're already doing, within, Scouts somewhat has built-in things of service, but sports teams and after-school clubs and other types of gatherings and things, helping them, that's what they're spending their time doing. So kind of helping them, asking them questions within that, and pointing out, just kind of softly handing them some opportunities to think about that they could be incorporating or just practicing a spirit of philanthropy within their already packed schedules, schools, what they could be doing in there.
I love that.
Gently.
Yes.
Because my kids in particular don't like when I obliquely try to suggest what they should do.
Absolutely. And probably from all ages, but also trying to make it fun. For me, my boys, that is, how do we do this as a group activity with friends? I think of someone who arranged a time for them all to get together and make sandwiches that then were brought to the mission. And that was so fun. So it was the both. It's the both and of, this was such a fun activity, and there was licorice at the end.
Yes.
And, what can we do? But then also later that night, in a moment of reflection, to say, let's talk about what that did. You guys made 400 sandwiches, right? That's amazing, right? Yeah. And you had so much fun doing it along the way.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think you're right. I think it's finding those moments when we can, and then really celebrating and talking intentionally about them afterwards.
Yeah.
Too.
And I think really, as if we do this, then the little moments build up to the bigger things. Because the little moments that they're already doing day to day in schools and whatnot, then build into taking my time when I have limited time and what can I choose to do with it. It builds to taking my time and deciding, my mom's not making me make all these sandwiches, but I want to.
Right.
So right. I think it builds to the bigger things.
Absolutely. I love that. Another question I had, and this is trickier and maybe easier at the local level, but just how do you recommend talking with kids about philanthropy here in our community, in our larger community, but then really on a national level? And I think, this is something I struggle with as a person.
Yeah, I don't know that I have the best recommendations. I have some thoughts because I struggle also with this. So I think, I cannot stress enough that I really firmly believe blurring the lines between the giving and the receiving is the way to do it in our community, particularly because we have to be honest that we are in a community that has a certain amount of wealth, and there is a conception around folks who are doing the giving, and there's a conception around folks who are doing the receiving. And if our kids learn from a young age that those are both things, and that in one breath they can be doing both the giving and the receiving, and that there isn't a huge difference between who is doing which role, who's playing which role. It's all a part of our community. And so as you ask about recommendations for talking to our kids about it, I think anything we can do in our community, and we can talk nationally, of course, but as we're looking at the Bainbridge Island community, we are both a part of the Bainbridge Island community. I think anything we can do to really take away the dichotomy, and to talk about how at any moment, both like I keep repeating, at any moment we can be both things, but even then, giving a few examples of, do you remember when you forgot your blank or you needed a blank? So even taking it out to a tangible thing, or when you didn't have your lunch and you were hungry and you forgot your sports equipment, and someone loaned, and you were really upset, you were really nervous about it, you thought you were going to be in trouble, and someone loaned it to you, and so it is both the theoretical, the spirit of giving and receiving, and then it is the tangible. Someone handed you something and you were grateful for it, and then in the next day you did X, Y, or Z. And so in our community, I think really talking about how everyone plays a part, and people are more. I think the thought of philanthropic giving in our community reduces the agencies and the people who are the recipients to only playing that role. And I think if we broaden that and again talk about how we play other roles, but also celebrate other things that happen, and not just I am not, as we said, I'm a part of Helpline House, and Helpline House doesn't just receive, and we are so grateful to receive because we are the gracious recipients of many people's philanthropic efforts, and we can celebrate the things that Helpline does, and that can be winnowed down to a family, a person. Let's not just put people in a role of being one or the other. Nationally, I think, and I really love your thoughts on that. So I'll talk nationally and then ask you your thoughts. Nationally, I think is a bit harder, especially for kids. Nationally, it feels bigger, it feels graver, it feels, it evokes some anxiety for kids around things that they have less control over. I don't know the best way to talk about it. I think one of the best things to do is to talk about it. I don't know, instead of not,
right.
I don't know the best way to, though. I'm so interested in your thoughts about that.
I agree, and I don't either, except maybe to talk about it, and talk about, and I think this is, again, as a human being and as an adult, I get a little hamstrung on this even personally, and knowing that some of these are structural, really big structural problems at the national level, and knowing that we can support all of those issues, or one or two of those issues, and then also knowing there are things we can do locally, right? And with the hope that locally, by supporting locally, or just by supporting, system change, which then obviously that could go in a political endeavor too, right? That could go in that direction. But I agree that maybe it's talking about it, and talking about, for some of those big national issues, or just big, large systemic problems, that by talking about it, by acknowledging the organizations that are out there doing the work, that's sort of a foray into it. Yeah. And knowing that that sometimes it is easier to start with, local with our local organizations or with an issue that is meaningful to them, going back to what is important to them. And if it's animal rights, right? That maybe that's an easier way to talk about sort of national issues. Yeah. But maybe that ebbs and flows as they grow, and maybe that some of these things are just easier as they mature, for sure. Yeah. And then other things, but just by acknowledging them, I think is so big, and not shying away from those hard conversations.
Right. And I think taking a cue, I'm grateful to our schools because my kids have come home with having already broached some of the systemic injustices and some of just what's going on in the nation and the world. And in particular, what schools I think have done, and I'm grateful that for this kind of lead-in, is found a youth of a similar age who has made a difference in that realm, and certainly has not cured things, and certainly has not completely, there's still work to be done, but has made a difference, and someone who they, in some way, they can relate to by being a young person.
Absolutely.
So it's not just other people need to take care of this. It's that this person really made a difference, and they're 10 and they're 13, and I am 10, or I will be 13 soon. And that's kind of an entry into the conversation also.
Absolutely. And that they probably started small.
Yeah.
Right?
Yes.
Like they probably started by a little recycling effort, if it's environmental or whatever that may be. It started with a small idea, and then it cascaded. And exactly, like now they are 13, and this is what they've been able to accomplish. And that just that's inspirational.
Yeah.
I love that. On the local level, what I especially appreciate is, because, one of my thoughts and questions was, how do we reduce the stigma at a local level? And I love how you talked about that, because it goes back to, again, it's not just this idea of philanthropy as I give. I give dollars. That's an incredibly important aspect.
So important.
Yes, absolutely. It is such an important aspect of this conversation, but it's so much more than that. And I think thinking about that is such an easier way to talk with our kids about this, to role model these things for our kids, and really to reduce the stigma, because I had the exact same thought. We are so fortunate to live in such a generous community. And something I think is, how am I making sure when I'm talking with my kids that they're not looking at someone who walks in the door of any organization and thinks that there's any problem there, right? That instead, if at any time they didn't have something, as you said, a piece of a sports equipment, and someone, graciously lends that to them, that's exactly right. They're the receiver in that moment, and hopefully they will pass that on the next time. And I think that's such an important way to think about this, because two things are true. Right now, I might be in the opportunity to lend kindness or time or dollars, and then, as you said, there's going to be a flip side to that. And I just think it's a much broader, more beautiful way to look at philanthropy, because it takes away there are two roles,
right?
And that it is so important that you are either one or the other at any given time. Yeah,
right.
I love that.
Yeah, I mean, and in some ways, so there are families who go to your kids' schools. Yep. There are families who go to my kids' school who use services and are vibrant, thriving members of our schools, our communities, our island. And so instead of kind of trying to pigeonhole a person for virtue of at some point in their life needing services, trying to celebrate how everything we all contribute in so many ways to our community, our island.
Absolutely. And just that idea that, and I think what's really resonating with me is that it is just intentional about talking about it in such a broader way, that it really isn't about, we give 50 jars of jelly, to Helpline, or we give X dollars. It is more important to talk about philanthropy in such a broader way.
Yeah.
So really, when, we started off talking about how do we talk to kids young and older about giving, and I agree with you completely that it's not so simple, and it's not straightforward. It's actually part of our every single day. We are giving and we are receiving, because then that's really inconsequential, because if I'm receiving 14 different things in a given day, that one thing doesn't matter. Right.
And food from Helpline Food Bank is just one of the things I received that day.
Absolutely.
And on the flip side, I gave other things that day.
Absolutely. Yep. And if every kid is both giving and receiving, and if every family is giving and receiving in all the ways that they are, and that they are as being a human being part of a community, then I think that's wonderful. I do think
exposure in some ways helps as well. And I'm thinking in particular about the Ordway School, who at Helpline, we have this wonderful tradition that we call the Parade of Condiments, which is a school-wide, all of Ordway for a whole week. They do a food drive, and we focus on condiments because that's not often, when you think of food banks, people think of like staples, and they put cans of food in the thing at the stores. And when you come to a food bank, you need other things as well. And so condiments are not always thought of. So we focus on that. And of course we get all sorts of things, and it's wonderful. And honestly, the best thing about the Ordway school-wide food drive is the last day of the food drive, every single student walks down from Ordway. That's why we call it the Parade of Condiments. And the police come, and they the past couple of years they've brought the police dog, and they park the car, and they have the lights going. And the kids, they have all their backpack with the food in their backpack. And also here, something I think is super important is that it's not what you brought in. So it all goes in your school, your classroom. And then the morning of, you just pick up whatever, you put it in your backpack. So it's not, I brought in all these and my backpack's so full. And it's just, we all brought in these, we put them in. So every child gets to be a giver in this sense. And they walk down, and it is the cutest. And so they empty their backpacks. But what I'm talking about exposure is we then have them walk through Helpline House. And every single year, I absolutely love the comments from the kids. Every single year we have, oh, I was here yesterday with my mom in like the coolest way. And kids are like, I want that. Like, they're looking on the shelves at the cereal, and they're, I want that, And well, I was here yesterday with my mom, and this and that. We also get, we just get the best comments, and that is but one. So one example of exposure where that kid now has walked through, every single one of those students has walked through, has seen it in ways that not everyone comes to Helpline, and so not everyone has had the opportunity to see that, but has seen it, has had kind of that experience with it, and just tucks it away. And so in the sense of exposure, taking the opportunities that you have to just, that is a lot of work to do, but for the kids is just a casual, it's an hour of their day that they don't know what orchestrated, what all went into it. Except that they got to see the police dog, and the sirens were going, and they had fun walking outside of their classroom and stuff like that. And so just kind of taking those opportunities, not, it's not a day-long thing. It's not a trip out to wherever where, 4 days worth of this, that, or the other. It's just taking some small opportunities to be able to do stuff like that.
And I think that's so great. I wish every school, honestly, could walk. I think that would be amazing, because I do think something I'd never thought about is Helpline or any food bank could sound a little bit scary, right, to a young child, of just not having any understanding or context for what that looks like, and not knowing that actually if a kid walks through this, they're going to be, I want that. My mom would never,
yeah, totally.
And just all
this
of that.
This is free?
Yes.
Whoa.
Yes. And I think that if we could, I just think that's great. I think that's amazing. And I never would have thought about that probably for so many kids, they just don't have any context. Yeah. But if they were able to see it and to understand that this is not a scary, dark place, that anybody walks into, this is actually a really amazing place where they would be excited to be. Yeah. I love that idea of exposure and figuring out different ways to do that.
Yeah.
I love it. On another note, but related, do you know of other opportunities within our community, local organizations, where kids can come from the smaller ages up until the older teenage years?
Yeah, I can speak to Helpline specifically, and I'll just quickly say we used to get calls all the time. We rely on volunteers, and we have amazing, wonderful volunteers, and they are all adults. And we need heavy boxes lifted. We need, we need times during the day when kids are in school. And so we didn't really have a program that facilitated kids being able to help out. We have long had high school students, bless them, who walk down, who could be doing X number of things after school. And one day a week, they walk down from the high school and they do a lot of really hard work at Helpline, and we save the hard work for them. And we're so grateful for them. And we used to get calls all the time. I want people wanting this exact experience. I want to bring my kids in. Can I do that? And I will say, I think what I'm about to say kind of relates to some of the stuff we've been talking about, is that because there is a stigma, as much as we try to push against it and try to lay groundwork for that, we don't put the high school students in the front. We put them in the back where they're kind of breaking down boxes and sorting and stacking. And because people who walk into the food bank do not necessarily want to see their kids' friends. And what we don't want is to make anyone feel uncomfortable in the way that, oh, hi, Mrs. So-and-so, and so we really hadn't challenged ourselves to think, how can we incorporate kids into this? But we got calls so consistently and thought, there's something here. There's merit here. Let's do something. Let's figure something out. And so we started a program in the summer, which is when we can facilitate it because the kids are out of school, and we call it Summer Helpers. And I have to say, it is more work for us to do this program, and yet we are super committed to it. So it is more work for us to come up with projects that are age appropriate. It is more work for us to get it all prepped and ready, and then when they are here for an hour, and then when they leave to clean it all up again. And yet we at Helpline think the greater good that is from that hour is so important. It's the exposure, it's the normalizing, it's the fun of it. It's you were there with your mom or your sibling or whoever. My kids, I forget, I think they packed fruit or something, and months later they'll be like, do you remember when I did that? And it's just it's that taking that opportunity. And so, and again, it's I've been to Helpline, or I did that, or so the benefit to that is what totally makes it worth it for us to put the effort in on our end to do that. And I think, so, that's what I can speak of for Helpline, but there are other opportunities like that on the island with different nonprofits and just different agencies in general.
Absolutely. And that makes complete sense. And probably a helpful thing would be just to call and see. Yeah. And it might not be every month, there might not be that opportunity, right. But trying to be creative about finding those times when an organization does have needs that would serve different ages.
Yeah, exactly. Just like you were saying, we can't do it all the time because the kids are in school. So trying to think of when we can do it, and some of the organizations maybe stretching to think of when might it be appropriate to be able to do that.
I love that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much. What a wonderful conversation. Thank you, Laura, and thank you Maria. Thank you, Maria, for allowing us to be part of your conversation today. Thank you all who have joined us. We hope that this conversation proves to be of benefit to you in your parenting. And we leave you with the foundation that healthy youth begin with healthy families, and healthy families build healthy communities. BYS is a nonprofit organization that is supported by community members like you. For more information, please visit AskBYS.org. We thank Milagro Castilleja for producing our show. Another big thanks to Martin, the Bainbridge Artisan Resource Network, for their generosity in allowing us to record in their media arts studio.